What up? My name is Duncan Lutz, software engineer, and today we're going to be continuing our look at how I built this contact form with HTMX and Rust. So in the last video we took a look at how I did the landing page and animation portion. Today we're going to be looking at how I actually handled the redirect and some of the JavaScript that we're sending down. I give a couple links to some cool resources that I use regularly for HTML stuff, so I'm going to send it over to me from the past. So, okay, we've looked over how I accomplished the background, we've looked over the basics of the index page. Now let's jump over to where the fun is happening on the contact page. So immediately there's some weird stuff happening and I've got to explain what I'm doing. So basically, this animate value, in order to accomplish the server-side validation and have the HTMX all work correctly, I needed to have the ability to control whether or not the elements on the contact page slide in when they're rendered. So I think I have an idea of how I could have avoided doing this as an if-else, but at the time I couldn't figure it out. If animate, we're doing nothing. Otherwise, we're setting animate to true. So where are we actually using this animate value? You can see here, I have a section in the class list of this div where I say if animate is equal to true, then we include the animate slide class. Otherwise, we're not going to include anything. Now what that results in is that if I go and I fill out, say, just these two values, and we hit a scenario where our server-side validation activates, you see it doesn't actually result in the page animating in like it does at first, because when I render this again, I don't include that animate value. It's kind of hacky. Again, sometimes you get in these situations with server-side rendering. If you want to get into complex UIs, you kind of have to make some shit up as you go, but if it works, I guess. So next up, let's look at our actual HTMX stuff. Here you see we've got the standard HX post contact. The target is this. We're swapping outer HTML. Throughout here, we've got a little bit of templating going on. So we've got value equals name, or if there's no name value, then we default to an empty string. Once again, that lets me handle for the server-side validation logic, because if the user has entered their name and their email but no message, then I need to populate those values so that they don't lose their state when HTMX replaces that element. And so we do that for name, and we also do that for input. Way down here, we do that for the message value. Now, message is actually a text area, so that gets shoved between the opening and close tags rather than in a value like input gets. Now down here, once again, just kind of basic templating stuff. If we did get an error, then we include some basic HTML in order to tell the user that there was an error. This is a great opportunity. I think a lot of people probably know about this site, but I didn't know about this site. Heroicons, you see here, beautiful handcrafted SVG icons by the makers of Tailwind. I really like this website, especially when I'm working on plain HTML websites, because they give you a straight SVG. So in this case, I actually used their error icon, and you can just copy the SVG. So heroicons.com, I'll leave a link to that in the description, along with all the other resources that I talk about in this video. Now we've got the submit button down here. Not a whole lot of interesting stuff happening here. Again, just a bunch of classes, like tailwinding to the max, dude. But I do have something interesting down here. So if we jump back over to our web page, just as a reminder, you'll see what happens if I make a successful request and I say, hello, my name is Duncan, and that's the message I want to provide. When I click send message, you'll see it does a fade out and then it redirects. Now, my goal was to create kind of pretty layout and have everything transition smoothly, which in a framework like React is maybe a little bit easier to accomplish just because you have client-side JavaScript out of the box. Now, in my scenario, I'm writing Rust and sending down HTML, and so what do I need to do? I need to send the JavaScript down myself. To accomplish that, I have added this if redirect, and it will populate a script tag. So I think in order to understand the logic, let's go jump over to our contact.rs. This is a HTTP route on our server. In this case, it is a post request. So here you'll see, using the Actix and Serday magic, I have a contact form struct, which implements the deserialize trait. And these are all the values in our form that get passed up automatically when you click submit on the form. So that gets passed to the route down here. To start, I instantiate a mutable context. In this case, it needs to be mutable because we are going to be inserting values into it. And we start off by inserting some values here. We do the name, email, message. Those values are populated so that when we re-render the page, we don't lose the user state, because that would be jarring and a crappy user experience. And then I provide animate is false, again, like we talked about earlier, to prevent all of the bubbles from reanimating back in. I did have this print message line here. This was just so I could actually see that something was happening on the server side. Then we've got this get error message function. So we can look at that up here. Basically, this is a function that does all of our validation for us. So I could have probably programmed this better. I don't really care that much for this example. We say if form name is empty, then we return name is required. I am using the email address crate to validate my email addresses. I didn't really want to use a regex or any other scenario where I could shoot myself in the foot, so email address crate it is. This is a really nice solution to validate email addresses in Rust. And then we check whether or not the message is empty. So in any of those scenarios, we return some, otherwise we return none. We're using the option data type in Rust. So down here, we get the error message, and if error message is not none, then we insert the error. Otherwise, we insert redirect. And so what we're saying is if an error occurred, then we're going to insert the error and we're going to return that value to the user. Otherwise, I want to trigger that client-side JavaScript that I sent down earlier. So let's go back and look at that now that we have an understanding of how we're getting there. Here, I have a wrapper element that's actually over on the index page, and we can look at that here. That just wraps the error and the form. And so in the scenario where we did successfully validate the form, we grab a reference to that wrapper DOM element and we add the animate fade class, which if we look up here in our CSS file, you'll see that it's basically just a quick fade from 1 to 0 animation using keyframes. Nothing really too crazy there. Then I do a set timeout, and this just lets me say, like, let's let the animation play out before we redirect the user, my goal being that everything looks smooth as we transition from one to the other. At that point, then we can jump over to our success page. Now, once again, the success page is very simple. It looks almost exactly like the index page where we're creating a context, we're rendering the success.html template this time, and then we are returning the results of that. So jumping down here to success, there's actually nothing crazy at all going on in here. It's pretty straightforward. In fact, it's basically just a copy of index.html with some different text and a link, and I'm not including contact.html. So things are pretty simple over here. We do the slide in animation. So we've covered the HTML templates, we've covered the JavaScript logic, how I'm handling validation, we're handling routes. We covered some of the CSS. I think we are probably there. Well, that is all that I had planned for this video. I did not actually implement the email logic, like sending the email to myself when a user reaches out via contact. Let me know in the comments if that is an interesting idea to you. I've worked with different services in order to accomplish that before, so I do know how to do it. I just didn't do it for this example. Let me know if you're interested in that. All of the resources that I referenced in this video are linked below, along with my socials. Go follow me on Twitter. Please go follow me on Twitter. That's everything I had. Thanks for watching. My name's Duncan, software engineer, and I'll see you next time. Bye.